it's 4:01. I don't know if we're still waiting for some folks to join. I think that what we'll probably experience is some people joining us along the way. And so we'll get started probably in the next minute once everybody's ready once everyone's ready. And if people join, we can announce them as they come on. As many of you may know, my name is Hans Manos. I'm the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Police Advisory Commission. At the PAC, we focus on the policy, the practice, and the custom of the Philadelphia Police Department, which I think is one of the reasons that we wanted to organize our town hall this evening to discuss what oversight means to you all, what, of course, the death of George Floyd means to you all, what policing means to you all. The death of George Floyd has placed oversight and policing on the national stage again, really. And many people are frustrated and concerned about how police interact with Black and brown communities. And the PAC saw this as an opportunity for residents and for community leaders to share their experiences, share their thoughts on police accountability, and also an opportunity for policymakers to listen to what that means to folks. I recognize that pain and tension is high. I also I've been a part of enough town halls to know that we have to encourage community voices and be mindful of the trauma present in all of us and to ensure that we focus on community in order to understand what that trauma and that pain is. Therefore, during this town hall, we really want to hear from all of you as much as possible. And I also want people to understand that we hear and listen, but that we're not necessarily going to walk away offering tangible solutions today. We're not going to walk away and say we have a solution to our problems. But what we do want to do is follow up with folks and summarize this for everybody and use this as a guide as we try and understand how we can improve, how oversight can improve, and how policing can improve. So I wanted to highlight that because I know that often the two complaints that we hear as folks who try and organize these meetings is that nothing came out of it, and that a bunch of technocrats spoke, but the community did not get the chance to. So we're going to try and avoid that today. We'll see how we do. And as an overarching idea, I want to say that racism and police violence are real and they're hurtful, right? We understand the need to discuss the history and express that pain. That's why we're here, and I'm very interested in doing that. But I'm going to ask that folks, to the extent possible, respect the time and constraints that we're asking for people. It's a 1-minute commentary wherever possible, and try and focus where possible on what needs to improve. If we can do that, I think we'll be able to provide more folks with the opportunity to communicate and to speak about what we want to talk about today and keep the conversation focused. So what I want to do now is first acknowledge that our police commissioner, Commissioner Daniel Outlaw, has joined us today. Danny, if you can unmute the commissioner, that'd be great. And so Commissioner Outlaw, as you know, we are in a very difficult time in the city today, so her time constraints are somewhat fluid. We don't know when she'll have to go, so we thought the best thing to do is to give the commissioner some time to speak right now at the top of our agenda so we can make sure we heard from her. So Commissioner Outlaw, please feel free.
Oh, great, thank you. Good afternoon to everyone on the call. I appreciate you having me. As you know, there's a lot going on right now, but I believe it is extremely important to take this time, as much time as I can, to hear from each and every one of you. So I'm not going to say a lot because I really think it's important that listening sessions like this really give those who need a voice an opportunity to be heard. So I share the PAC's commitment to promoting and upholding transparency and accountability. Some of you may know that we recently accepted this challenge. I appreciate his challenge, but I think that these are things that we should be doing proactively anyway. So I look forward to hearing as much as I can what everyone has to say and really putting these concepts and these ideas and this emotion and what's been experienced into meaningful action. So thanks again for having me.
you, Commissioner, for being with us today. We appreciate it. So I'd like to introduce some of the city council members who are here as well, to make sure that we acknowledge their presence and thank you for coming. I see Councilman Curtis Jones is with us. Thank you, Councilman Jones. I believe that we also have Councilman Alan Dom with us. I believe that Councilman Kenyatta Johnson's here with us. Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Bobby Heenan is here. And I am unclear, and Councilwoman Jamie Gauthier is here. Thank you, Councilman member. Did I miss anybody? Okay, I did not think so. Thank you, council members, for taking the time to be with us today. We absolutely appreciate that, as well as the other police leaders who are present on the call, as well as other city leaders who are present. Please excuse me if I don't introduce all of you, but I want to be mindful of time. Also, we have several members of the Police Advisory Commission here. Our chair, Rhonda Goldfein, is here, as well as George Mosey, another member, Bilal Qayyum, Sarah Young, and I think that is everybody from the PAC that is able to make it. So we're very excited to have so many different folks from the city, from the PAC, and from the police department join us today. What I thought I would do now is highlight for some folks who are not familiar with the PAC what we've been doing over the past few days, as well as what we generally do with our business. So generally, as I mentioned, we focus on the policy, the practice, and the custom of the Philadelphia Police Department. That is typically embodied through some policy reports that you can find on our website that have responded to other protest incidents like the ICE protest that occurred, have responded to high-profile incidents such as the Starbucks arrests from 2018, and have been somewhat more technocratic in our responses to body-worn camera policies and to our responses to canine encounters, for instance. Those are just examples. There's probably around 9 reports on the website right now. I encourage everyone to check them out and engage us if you have any questions. So I do want to bring us into, I'm sorry, Commissioner Sean Along is also on the call. I apologize, Sean, from the Police Advisory Commission. So just in general ground rules, more lately, the PAC has been attempting to engage the police department on a few things that we're observing, but more importantly, observing protests as much as possible, to be present, to bear witness, and to make sure that we understand what folks are protesting about, what their concerns are, but also what the experience of protesting is. So that's been a great deal of our work, probably since Saturday when things really, when protests became more heavy in the city. So I don't want to go too much onto that, but I do want to highlight that what we want to do here is introduce some discussion topics. But we want you all to also introduce some discussion topics. So if you can utilize the chat feature and type in what you feel you want to discuss today, what topics are important to you, what you want to hear more about or hear a plan about, please utilize that. Danny's going to synthesize that for us, and we're going to introduce it in real time as we get those questions. Later on, we'll ask for public comment, and we ask that you use the raise the hand feature, under the reactions. I just did it right now.
You can also use in the participant window, if you open that up, scroll over your name and you'll be able to raise your hand when we get to that section, and just click on that and it'll pop you up to our list so that we can unmute people in the order that they raise their hand. Okay,
thank you, Danny. So that's the 2 ways that we can keep some order but get folks involved and engaged. So please try and use those, and we will unmute you for your question and try and submit your question via the chat feature. So some of the topics, just to get us started, that I think that I've come to understand from spending some time in with the folks who are protesting and expressing themselves in the city. George Floyd was murdered by police in Minneapolis. How did a police activity in Minneapolis kick off protests around the country, but also days of protests in Philadelphia? What about that event resonates here, and why does it hit so close to home? Another question, just to kick us off, is the idea of what does reconciliation mean to you? if we are to move past protest and reconcile, what does it mean? A third question, we should unpack racism and what people mean when they speak about police racism. And finally, not finally, of the four that we're recommending, what is anti-racist policies and practice? What anti-racist policies and practices do you all envision as it relates to police practice and policy? So at this point, if there's anyone who wants to any public comment that we want to do, I absolutely encourage it. I'd like to start with Armina Domingue from this certified trauma focused therapist who is joining us today.
Hello, everyone. You know, when I heard what happened to our brother George Floyd, the first thing that came to mind was, wow, Black Lives Matter. It's a new slogan, but it's an old problem, right? And so many experiences of trauma from generation of racial injustice, while at the same time saying now is the time to move forward for a real change. I can't help but think about the emotional and psychological trauma from decades ago that is now coming back full circle. You know, we saw the video of the officer pinning George Floyd to the ground with his knee on his neck. That is bringing up buried emotions for some of us in our Black communities. This is not an isolated nor unique situation, right? When we look at historical trauma, it kind of put it in the realms of saying we haven't really been able to catch our breath before another incident occurs. I mean, I think about the last 3 months, there's been at least one killing of a Black person by police. And so as soon as we feel like, okay, maybe we're done, before the exhale happens, something else occurs. I'm grateful to be on this platform because I think that this is part of the planning stage that we're in right now. You know, we need to be in a solution-focused position that will require us to gather our emotions, take care of ourselves, gear up for the long-term pursuit of justice, which is keeping the dialogue open and being as candor as possible.
Thank you, Armina. I appreciate those words, and I particularly appreciate you highlighting the historical trauma. Not a concept we hear often, but that we absolutely need to get our hands around, because I think that speaks to a lot of the reasons. One of the questions we had, right, was why did this matter so much to Philadelphia? And I think the historical trauma is a good foray into understanding why it means so much to us. So I really appreciate you highlighting that and discussing that with us today.
For sure.
I will wait for Danny to let me know when we have a community comment that needs to be made, but I do want to recognize until then, Dr. Jean Wright, who's the Director of Behavioral Health and Behavioral Health Services.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Hans, for having me participate. Thank you, Commissioner and Chair people, and also City Council and all the other people who are on the call. The first thing that came to my mind when I learned of the George Floyd incident is my two sons. I have two sons, the youngest of which is 14. And so there was a visceral reaction for me when I think about my two sons, and I think about my nephews, and I think about my own experiences when I was younger. And then I immediately went to my next thought, which is all the wonderful work that has been done in the Black community to bring focus to some challenges. And I think Armina hit on when she said the historical, but I would add another word, and that is vicarious trauma. And a lot of people think of that term and they relate it to caregivers and people who take care of other people, which is absolutely appropriate. But in this sense, I'm asking myself, Hans, you asked, what did I feel and why does it matter in Philadelphia? Whether you're in Philadelphia, Minneapolis, Chicago, New York, Louisville, I can keep on naming cities, it doesn't matter. The vicarious piece is we see ourselves in the young men and sometimes women who have been harmed. And so I cannot look at George and not see my son. I cannot look at Trayvon Martin and not see my son. I cannot look at individuals who look like me that are in these situations and not see myself. And so the vicarious trauma piece is, even though it did not happen to me directly or my son directly, it is happening to me. And so that is the challenge that I think many people are wrestling with. And then at the same time, Hans, I have to be very transparent with you that I have enjoyed the past 15 years relationship working with Philadelphia Police Department in a very way. And the trainings that we do together and the things that we're able to do in the space of crisis intervention training and working with individuals who have different abilities and different challenges that the police commissioner and others, Inspector Healy and people I work with, are very sensitive to and work very hard in the community and to bridge gaps. I have 2 pages here in front of me of all the work that has been done in Southeast and in Northeast and different places that have been very successful working with the Philadelphia Police Department. And so those are the 2 things that I have in my mind as I look at this. The first is my visceral response as a father. And then the other is my responsibilities and privileges working with a group of men and women that have done very well in terms of, in my field, behavioral health, supporting people on the autism spectrum, people with serious mental illness, people with behavioral health issues in the form of addiction and dependence. And so I cannot have one without the other when I think about the totality of what we've been able to do in Philadelphia. It's not perfect. It certainly is something we're working towards, but I'm proud of the work I've done with the police department. And I'm also still much a father and a person of color. And so I think it doesn't have to be either or. Both things can be true. And I think that's the sensitivity that I'd like to bring to the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. You know, I got to say that this is a part of the conversation that I've been having over the last few weeks. You know, there are a lot of officers who are of color, Black officers who have sons or daughters, and often have these concerns. And so I think it's important to highlight how difficult these relationships are. You know, I speak to police officers professionally on a regular basis, and I like almost all of them. And so I recognize exactly what you're saying, how it's tough to reconcile that. People who have police officers in their family, how do you reconcile these ideas? And honestly, it's tough. It's absolutely difficult to do that. And I think that's something that a lot of people are grappling with. So I really appreciate you raising that as just another layer in this really complicated web of feelings and ideas and thoughts as we talk about policy. So thanks so much for bringing that out here. It's really important. I understand we have a community member who wants to contribute. Danny, can you identify that person, please?
Yeah, Curtis Brown, I think, wanted to chat. I'm going to unmute you, Curtis.
Thank you. I'm not sure if everybody can hear me clearly.
I can hear you great.
Beautiful. First, thank you, everybody, for allowing this opportunity for not only the community to come together, but to have this open dialogue with those that we count as leaders in our community. I know there has already been expressions of why is it important to Philadelphians? Well, I've been in Philadelphia my entire life. This city is all I've ever known. Even from a young boy, you know, we grew up with the shadow of the MOVE bombing as something that was etched in our minds growing up. Frank Rizzo, being a young Black man, for the men that were raising us, were always horrific and cautionary tales of how to navigate with policemen in the city. Obviously, that's not the case today, but those are the things that are etched in our hearts and minds when we have interactions with law enforcement. I myself have been in law enforcement for over 17 years. And I felt it prudent to be here today because I host a weekly web show. And obviously, because this is the biggest thing right now in the world, it beat out a pandemic, we polled over 500 of our listeners and fans. And one of the things I didn't want to do, I didn't want to come here and point fingers. I didn't want to come here and shout and huff and yell, but we wanted to come here with an action plan, a 10-point suggestive list of things that are tangible that could be discussed. Obviously, Hans, nobody expects for there to be a resolution at the end of this, because Lord knows if we ain't figured it out by now, obviously there's a lot more dialogue to go. But we did compile the list from multiple think tanks, and we recorded a lot of interviews from not only protesters, but community leaders and those that have lived in the community who interact with the police. And one of the first things that I will say off the bat is Philadelphia's law enforcement community does a hell of a job to try to change the perspective in the community. Now, a lot of that is being tested with peaceful protesters having complaints about the reactions to peaceful protests, not the looters, not the rioters. Trust me, we understand the necessity for law and order, but the peaceful protesters have a lot to say about how the police interaction is when obviously this is a time where tensions are running high, emotions are running high, and I'm not sure if this is the time to bring up the tangible things that we had talked about, but one of the reasons why it was important is because I brought a list directly from the community, and hopefully we have the opportunity to kind of discuss it, maybe not at length, but a few of the suggestions that are here that we highlighted seem like they're really, I'm not saying I'm not that intelligent, but the collective really came up with a pretty decent compiled list.
Great. So are you saying you're going to forward that over us, or do you want to?
You tell me what works best, Hans, because I could go down the bullet points right now, or I could just email it.
Why don't you pick your top three just for time? Not if it's easy, if you can.
No, I got you, brother. One of the things that jumped out to me personally was that there was a time period where law enforcement lived within the community. And we know that changed. You have an investment in the very community that you live in. Not only that, you have a knowledge of those that are in the community. Now we had varying percentages, but ultimately we wanted to see a 50-50 percentage of those that actually lived in the communities that they policed. That was paramount. Your use of force policies. Use of force policies not only needs to be public knowledge, but also it should be explained as a part of the arresting process. I thought that was an interesting one. Definitely not something that is typically done, but a lot of people just have questions as to why the police reacted in the way that they did. And was it a part of their policies or the training that they're taught to be able to de-escalate a situation, because a lot of people feel like there is an escalation, which is in opposition to obviously what we want. And the biggest thing, and I think this is the one that everybody kind of agreed on, was that after basically the 3-strike rule, after 3 strikes of proven excessive force, that officer should no longer be an officer.
Well, Curtis, thank you very much for bringing those ideas. We should connect offline so I can get the other 7, because those 3 are great. So I definitely want to hear the other ones, and we'll synthesize that.
All right.
I appreciate that. If we were at the public meeting, I'd give you a hug or something. But
don't worry, brother.
We give a bump here.
As long as I got my mask on, I'll do it.
Good to know. Good to know. So thank you very much, Curtis. I definitely appreciate what you just brought out there. And I think that, these are topics we've heard before, the review of force policies, clear explanation of policies to folks who are most impacted. And of course, the idea that police officers need to live in the community. I think we hear about those often, and I'm happy to hear you bring them up today, because I think it's a good point here. I'd like to, if possible, move next to Jabari Jones, the president of the West Philly Corridors Coalition. Is Jabari unmuted?
All right. So, Jabari, is it under Giselle Jones? I think that's maybe them. No, oops, sorry. Here we go.
Yeah, good.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, that was the councilman you were referring to over there. Yeah, great to be here. Great to join everybody. There's been a lot going on, and I'm a little disheveled. We just literally got in after spreading some flyers down on 52nd Street. But it's really great to join everybody. I'm glad that these conversations are happening, and I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to get on this call because I think it's really important to have these kinds of conversations. I think the first part of something that was said earlier and why is it resonating so far with so many people here in Philly is because I think there's a lot of unaddressed police situations that happen in communities, and I know for a fact in communities that have gone unaddressed for a very long time. Literally during the, I want to say 4 or 5 months ago, I participated in a forum with young people and Sheriff Rochelle Bilal, and they pretty much had some really candid conversations between young people in the community and the sheriff and some of her staff, and they were reporting all sorts of activities and ways that they had been antagonized by police. There were police that had been, I know in one circumstance, and I believe there's at least one council member looking into this, where they were saying that some kids would be on their way to school late, and cops would potentially see them either walking to school late or something like that and think that they were committing truancy or something, and stop them and, we're antagonizing them. And then there's some kind of fine or something that was being assessed on young people just for like kind of being outside and going to school late and stuff. So there's been a lot of these things that have come up, and I know they've been reported to a lot of people other than me. And people have felt that those allegations have never been addressed, that there's no clear, concise or transparent process where somebody that has a situation with police that they feel is unfair or not right, that can be reported, and that there's going to be some kind of action or investigation that's actually going to happen. And then after that investigation, it gets back to the individuals that says, hey, we looked into this for you. This is what we found. This was the conclusion of that, or what have you. And if there is a process, then the process has not been very transparent because a lot of these people either have lost faith in that process, or they don't believe in it, or they've gone through it and have had some kind of an experience where they don't think it means anything anymore. So I think that one of the things that should definitely be prioritized is figuring out what that process is. A level of civilian oversight rather than advisory. Advisory is great. It's great that you can have discussions. It's great that you submit proposals. But I think that when you give oversight and you create a citizen-controlled oversight commission of regular residents that can sit in a room and maybe review some of this conduct and things that are happening, and in a very unbiased way, they can mete out some judgment or some kind of oversight ability. Until you get that kind of thing, I don't think people are going to feel like that there's going to be real change in policing in neighborhoods.
Yeah, thanks, Shamar. I think that what you're highlighting there, the concept of transparency, procedural justice, and legitimacy are really important, and the pillars, right? The pillars that came out of the Obama Task Force and have been talked about with relation to policing for a long time. So I think that's a great thing. I'm really happy you raised it here, that in order to continue to report misconduct, folks need to believe that have faith in that process and have some transparency in that process. Thank you for raising it. I appreciate it. I think we have a public comment coming in from, Councilman Johnson.
Sorry, just finding him on my list. All right, Kenyatta, you should be unmuted.
Yeah, thank you, Hans. I appreciate it. I just wanted to, thank you for your leadership. Thank the members of the board for their leadership. And during our current environment, just wanted to express my level of support around the budget. I know that the current administration has talked about you having to reduce your staff from 10 to 3. I've been able to work with Senator Anthony Hardy Williams on the state level to provide some funding from the state level to help close that gap. But also I'm going to work with Councilman Curtis Jones to push the administration to do even more, because now is not the time to reducing your staff. And most importantly, working with Councilman Curtis Jones, who's the chair of the Public Safety Committee, around your recommendations to the administration to make sure that you have you're empowered, I'm gonna put it that way, to make sure that you can represent the people to the best of your ability, because now the eyes of the city are gonna be watching us as we move forward. I do wanna take a moment and also thank Bilal Caillou for being on the ground and his leadership and just staying in contact and holding us accountable and pushing us around this issue. And also our Commissioner, Danielle Outlaw, for having an open mind and taking time out of her schedule and being on this call. And so I just wanted to mention that, and Hans will follow up regarding the next steps and seeing how we can be supportive, not only from a budgetary standpoint, but most importantly, it's about the policy and making sure y'all have the ability to enforce the type of policies and regulations that's needed to protect people. And so I just wanted to make those brief comments and just let you know that I just want to take time out of my schedule to be on this call to be supportive.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Johnson, for being supportive of the PAC at all times, and Councilman Jones as well, and obviously Council President Clark. Incredible support, incredible leadership. I was there for us, so we thank you very much for your comments here and for your sustained support at all times. So thank you very, very much. I wanted to move on to Rabbis Dr. Earl and Deborah Bowen from the congregation Temple Bethel, who have some words for us.
I'd like to say shalom to all of you. I have to apologize for Dr. Bowen. He is on another Zoom call, and so I have to represent us both to the police commissioner and to the city council members that are here and to those who are responsible for this conference. I want to thank you for allowing us to participate. Today, we all struggle to breathe. As a rabbi, it is given to me to try to make sense of this for my constituents. Sometimes that feels impossible, for I too am seeking for answers. The horrific events that we witnessed as George Floyd, a blessed memory, spent his last minutes of life is something that few of us will ever forget. What is more, it opened up old wounds that we had no idea existed. Suddenly, we relived the pain that we felt each time we heard of another Black man having his life senselessly taken by those we were told we must respect and honor to keep us safe. Along with this pain comes a new fear for each of us who are individuals of color. We wonder within ourselves, who will be next? Will it be our sons, our fathers, our grandfathers, a relative, or just a friend? We struggle to understand the rules. What must we do in order to ensure that our Black men will be safe? Shall they never shop at a store or jog on a track? Shall they never drive in a car or sit on their own porches lest they be murdered just for doing so? The truth is, in today's society, one merely has to be Black and do something that will annoy someone or do absolutely nothing in order to be killed by a sick individual who wishes them dead. So collectively we ask, when will it all end? How did people develop this sense of privilege? What makes an individual determine that because of their race or political standing or their bank accounts, that they are in fact superior to all others? What is more, when will those who hold these sick ideologies be brought to justice when carrying out their dastardly acts? Will the day come when Black mothers and Black fathers can watch their Black sons walk out the door of their homes and not fear that they might never see them again because of some senseless evil? Today I speak for every one of us who are mourning this terrible loss of a good man, for everyone who is protesting peacefully to honor his memory. As I reflect on our sacred holiday of Passover that we recently celebrate, I think that perhaps Mr. Floyd's life very well may have been taken as a sacrificial lamb to the slaughter. But perhaps his sacrifice will be the impetus for the change we all long for and that this country so badly needs. Perhaps we will finally not only remove the inflammatory physical statutes that have been placed throughout our country that represents the oppression of our people, but we might once and for all change the statutes, the laws on the books that allow these indignities to exist. Rest in peace, George Floyd. May your memory be for a blessing. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Rabbi Bowen. That was very deep, and I think that was incredibly well said. And I appreciate you taking the time to prepare that for us and to deliver that to us. And I think that we all agree that a call for more humanity as well as a call for more direct policies are both needed. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I'd like to move on to a PAC board member and the executive director of the Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network, George Mosey. Can we find George and unmute him?
We're okay.
Hey, George.
So I was asked to comment on two things, to give my thoughts on the recent events, and then to talk about what police accountability would look like from this point forward. Most of the people on the call know me. And for me, with my history, 28 years as a prosecutor, currently the executive director for the Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network, death by homicide is nothing new. But I reacted differently to this. And in fact, it dawns on me our world has reacted to this killing in a way that it almost never does. You know, protesting in cities all around the world. And you know, I asked what was different about this. He wasn't a political figure, not a superstar athlete, not a movie star, but his death has in fact turned the world upside down. Our city was turned upside down last week. I can't speak for everybody, but what was different for me, especially as a prosecutor, was that we all watched it happen. And we watched it happen with unmistakable clarity. There was video, audio, you know, the knee on the neck, the officer who was pacing back and forth, allowing the homicide to occur. There were the pleas from the spectators, the pleas from Mr. Floyd, you know, and just like most Black people, you know, I was talking to the screen. Even though I knew what the end result was going to be, I found myself saying, let him up, you know, check him out, do something. And none of that happened. You know, this was in Minneapolis, as we all know, not Philadelphia. But in the end, what every Philadelphian saw and what the entire world saw was a cop killing a Black man. You know, Gene talked about the vicarious trauma, how it hits home for us because that could have been me, could have been my sons. But it ought to hit home for police officers too. And that brings me to the second point. You know, what should police accountability look like going forward? Our commission has worked really hard to create more transparency. You know, we're trying to make sure that the executive order is carried out with fidelity. You know, we're doing all those things, but I wanted to point out something else. That the reality is that whenever a police officer does something, every police officer is going to be judged. Is that fair? I don't know. But it's the reality. whenever a prosecutor did the wrong thing, I got judged. Whenever a cop does the wrong thing, they're going to be judged. And understanding that reality ought to cause every police officer to recognize that accountability starts with them as an individual. You know, it's not what the folks at the top say. Commissioner Outlaw will say the right thing. You know, I'm looking forward to meeting her. I know she's going to say the right thing. She's going to do the right thing. I do my best to say the right thing, do the right thing. But at the end of the day, it's what the folks we put on the street do and say. And if they're not doing the right thing, then it's going to reflect on all of us. The thing about cops, and I think it was extremely impactful and important that every officer who was on the scene in Minneapolis was finally arrested and charged. Because if they hadn't been, then the heart of what I'm trying to address wouldn't have been achieved. And that is encouraging accountability with every officer to police themselves and their brother and sister officers. Because until that happens, there will never be accountability. Yeah. Thanks for letting me share.
Wow, George, as always, some very deep words and some great leadership. I think for me, what you said there about the idea that police need to police themselves and how frontline officers can differ from leadership, like any organization, and especially a large organization, and how important it is to build that. And so I know some breaking news that there is a real attention being paid to the idea that it needs to be safe, expected, and normal for police officers to police themselves. That's something that can be built, that's something that can be encouraged, but it has to be done thoughtfully, and it has to be done in a sustained way with a lot of attention being paid towards it. So I think that I'm hopeful we'll see that in Philadelphia and around the country, and we do have some examples from around the country where that's been effective. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of that. And the general idea that accountability matters, I think, is something that a lot of folks are discussing. A lot of folks are referencing, I should say, right? And so I think if some future folks can talk to us more about, defining what accountability looks like, Curtis mentioned this a little bit, that would be really helpful. And just again, to summarize some of what George said, and also to build on what some of Curtis said, there is this idea, right, that one police officer, in this case, from across the country, will impact how police officers in different cities are, not policing local, which is something of a new phenomenon, right? And I mentioned Curtis because Curtis mentioned it's also very historical. He mentioned Frank Rizzo and the MOVE bombing and how those are still issues that exist here. So to me, that was a nod towards the conversation on reconciliation that we haven't yet got to here today. But if some folks want to unpack that would be helpful as well. But as always, speak to your hearts. But those are some areas that I'm hearing from some PAC leadership and some members of the community who are speaking here today that I want to highlight. But enough from me. I do want to hear from, if possible, it looks like we have Pastor Brissett from the Germantown Seventh-day Adventist Church here to share some words with us.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. And thank you for this gracious invitation to share. This tragic killing of George Floyd, and Curtis Brown and some others have so adequately said from a father position, so I will not repeat that. But as a faith leader, as a pastor of a predominantly Black church, it would be wonderful as we continue to march forward. And I'm hurting, where congregation is hurting. There's anger, there's frustration. It would be absolutely helpful if police and clergy and congregations would have regular times to talk together, to discuss some of the pertinent issues in the community, and for community members and congregation members to know the police officers and vice versa. We are, as I watched that video, 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and a lot began to replay in my mind. I am not originally from Philadelphia. Our family moved here to pastor a church. And as I sat there watching it, hearing him say, "I can't breathe," and hearing him cry out for mercy and for grace and for those around who are saying, get off his neck. And then watching one particular image of the officer with his hand in his pocket while his knee was resting on his neck. For 400 years, that 8 minutes and 46 seconds wasn't just literal in that moment. It was a replay of 400 years of sustained pressure on the knee of Black men and women. And, as a faith leader, I understand that part of the problem that racism has against Black people is at the core a heart issue. But I believe that we have to not just start with conversation, but continue with action. We've got the Black church and the police officers and the police justice system have to continue, and it's happening. It's happening. I've been through some discussions. It's happening, but to continue to forge relationships. And I think, as was said very eloquently earlier, to have individuals from the police who either live in the community or who come into the community, and when you're not policing, sit down and get to know the people in the neighborhood. It would clear up, and it would help in so many different ways. As a Black man, and for those of the Black women on the line, it is deplorable and heinous that when we're born into this world, our children are born into this world, they're born with a target on their chest and born with a target on their back. And so we need collaborative movement going forward that the faith community can help to bring emphasis to situational ethics and areas that leadership can help to grow and nurture our communities. And one of the ways that can happen is by us being transparent that part of the disparity is economic. And when we bring economic equality and equity to the city, we will find that we will be making great strides towards healing the problems and the distrust and the hurt and the pain that is being suffered by Blacks today.
Thank you, Pastor Brissett. I do agree that some of these problems are so complex. And you mentioned economics is one piece, but there's education, there's economics, there's mental health, as has been raised, there's trauma and historical trauma. And so much of this is what makes this all very complicated. One thing in Philadelphia that we hear often from folks is the idea that it's incredibly, also a very violent city. And so we ask police to do so much as it relates to opioids, as it relates to mental health, and as it relates to gun violence and violence, and it becomes unclear what their mandate is and what we want from them. So I do recognize that it's incredibly complicated soup of issues, and that trauma and education are definitely in there, and how we manage those over decades are certainly problems. So I thank you for raising that and making sure that we're mindful of the idea that this is incredibly complicated. I do see that Councilman Jones, who's been here, has a comment for us. Can we unmute Councilman Jones?
Can you hear me?
I hear you perfectly.
First and foremost, thank you for this format. The greatest compliment an elected official / politician can give anyone is to not talk and listen. And some of the things I've heard have been very, 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 very helpful. I want to share with you something maybe you may not know, you may know. I happen to be a Black man. I actually was born that way. I did not wake up one morning and find myself in city council surrounded by privilege. I had to walk streets, do things that African-American men do and face every day. I'm gonna give you another insight to who I am. I was a former gang member from 54th and Burke Street. Commissioner, Google me. But I wasn't the worst of them, I wasn't the best of them, but I went through it with all of them. And what you do when you are from a gang, you deal with police interaction all the time. And what I learned from that is that one size does not fit all. There are individuals, and you have to judge them as individuals. You have to hold police to a higher standard because of the role they play, but some of them are different than others of them. I have had to hear from my father do's and don'ts because I'm a Black man, what I can say, what I can't say, the tone I could use, and even when it comes down to facial hair. I've had to, as a father, actually have the talk with my sons, because even if you're a council person, yeah, that might get you a moment of courtesy when you're stopped at night, but that doesn't, you can't transfer that to your children who have to travel to and from work. My son worked at the Criminal Justice Center and got off at 1 in the morning. Every day he got off, I went and got him. Because of what, not because of the criminal element that might have gotten at him, but you never know. So the reason why I'm very thankful to be on this, and I was really almost saddened by the fact we only got through 3 of those suggestions, and you got the other 7. Those are the things that Councilman Johnson, Councilman, I think Dom is on the line, I see Gardier is on the line, that we are going to take back and make useful. I was on the line with about 30 school teachers from Man Mastery, which is at 54th and Birch, which is ironically right across the street from where I used to hang out. And it was a mixed race group, predominantly white females, and they were crying. When I tell you these weren't cute tears, these were I'm breaking down tears. And they were saying, what can I do? What can I do? I don't want to use that word woke, but I want to be a part of the solution. And I'm gonna tell them like I would share with you. God doesn't let you pick your battlefield, but he allows you to do battle wherever you find yourself. So there's nothing I could do. Councilwoman Gilmore asked me to go out in the street and stand in front of a store on Haverford Avenue and protect the store. I'm not doing it. That is, I'm not trained and qualified to do that. But I am a lawmaker. I'm a policy maker. I do budgets. What you are doing is very important because we think we know what we're talking about. We think we do. But if nothing else that we've learned over the last 10 days, all of us are smarter than any one of us. And we are on this line to hear solutions that we can take back. I'm never going to be a police officer. I'm not going to be a butcher, baker, or candlestick maker. But I can be a lawmaker. And I can take those 3 suggestions you have that hopefully will come 10 suggestions you have, and we may not get through all of them. We may not be able to do all of them, but some of them will make it better. And so I hope to hear those kinds of things. I think Jabari Jones touched on some stuff, and I'll conclude with this. I didn't wait for the tragedy to happen before I started being a part of the solution. We've passed laws that where, and I'm gonna deal with the elephant in the room, McNesby told me if we pass that bill that enabled you to have more money, right? That he was going to put my name on a Goodyear blimp and fly it over my district. That is real. And I said to him, if you do that, I'll never have to pay for a haircut ever again in my life. Because where I come from, it is not always, you know, the thing to be. And I don't subscribe to them against us. And let me tell you why I say that. Every time the commissioner has a graduating class of new officers, I go up and talk to them. I go up and talk to them because I explain what it's like and what they should be prepared for, which might not be in a book. Everybody always thinks that because you're an elected official, you don't have to go through that. My daughter was on the front page of the Daily News, having had her door kicked in at 4 in the morning, right? The first person, once she got up off the floor and the gun out of her face, was her dad. Second person that got that call was the mayor. But you should not have to be a councilman's daughter for you to be given respect, to you be given dignity. And so I want us to work together, but I want us to know that not a soul on this Zoom call is the problem. Now we're in therapy right now, and that's what we're doing, and we need to do that. But at the end of the day, we need those suggestions so that we can go back to our respective fields of endeavor and make a daggone difference. I'm done.
Thank you, Councilman Jones, for your leadership, and for your comments there, for bringing us all back to the idea how as parents this is really tough and I appreciate it. And I think the idea of, you know, you said the talk is something that I remember the first time I heard it referred to as the talk. And I said, what's the talk? And then when I heard about it, I said, oh, wow, I've gotten the talk. It's funny, right? So, you know, it's a real issue. I think a lot of people have talked about what it means to be a parent and send people out and what they've done, you know, things like go out at 1 in the morning to pick your son up to make sure that they're safe. Right. So I appreciate you sharing that with us and sharing your experience and your growth as a person. I think it's really powerful and helpful. I believe, Danny, if I'm wrong, correct me, that we have a community member who wants to contribute.
Yeah, someone named Jamie. I've unmuted you, I believe.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
How are you?
I am well. Thank you for the opportunity to participate today. I really appreciate being here, and I've appreciated hearing the feedback from the community. We were talking earlier about, you know, Philadelphians and how they feel about what happened in Minneapolis with the murder of George Floyd. And I just wanted to make the point that I think Philadelphians very much connect to what happened in Minneapolis. And I think they connect to it, you know, by experiencing the trauma and the pain of seeing that murder. But I also think they connect to it from the standpoint of recognizing that, you know, they've been asking for change here in Philadelphia for years, and we haven't moved far enough. Even though we've not moved far enough. And I don't think that it's lost on people that that's the case, you know. And I mean that from the symbolic to, you know, the really substantive changes that need to happen. Even with the Rizzo statue, I think it's great that we got that to happen. I think it's wonderful that finally people's requests were answered, but that should have happened already. And that wasn't a hard thing to say, that this is not a man who doesn't reflect our values and doesn't reflect our city. And, you know, in a city, you know, that is majority of color, that shouldn't have been a hard conversation than it was. And so I don't think that it's lost on people that they haven't gotten what they've asked for with respect to police accountability in this city, with respect to having a stronger contract that would force that accountability, and with respect, you know, frankly, I think you guys are doing an amazing job, but we need to invest more in the Police Advisory Commission so that we strengthen your ability to represent the citizens of Philadelphia. And so, you know, this has been a really hard and painful time in my district and all across the city. But what I'm hoping is that we take this opportunity. This is an opportunity for us to make substantive change in all the areas that we need to. And I think we're getting a message loud and clear from the community, and it would be a really wasted opportunity for us to not listen. And so I think that's the work that we have to do starting right now. And I know that, you know, the commissioner is on here today, and I know that the police department has had a hard job trying to manage everything that's going on in our city over the past several days. But I also think we have to step out of this and debrief on a number of areas. So one, you know, what happened on the highway the other day, in my perspective, was unacceptable. And I know that there's some level of agreement from the commissioner because the policies were changed subsequently. But I think we have to debrief that. I think, you know, I was on 52nd Street the other day when the unrest broke out there, and I was on the corridor several times that day, and there were different feels each time. Sometimes at one point the protests were rather peaceful. At one point they weren't. And, you know, the protesters were definitely aggressing on the police, throwing bricks, setting things on fire, looting. But even then, I questioned the response. It was really alarming to be in my residential neighborhood and to have tanks coming down the street, right? And to have tear gas being set off in places where people live. And to have, you know, rubber bullets being shot. And most of these people were young people from my eye, right? And so I think we have to have a conversation in this city on all of these areas, and we should not let this moment pass. And so I'm grateful to be here today, and I look forward to being a partner in the ongoing conversation as well.
Thank you, Councilman Gauthier, Councilmember Gauthier. I really appreciate your words there. I think that, you know, if we're being honest, that's exactly right, right? There were young people in our community who were injured, and it's our youth we want to invest in. And it is just, regardless of anything else, jarring to see this presence in our city. And even if we can talk about what's necessary in terms of public safety, when I turned the corner onto JFK and I saw men in army fatigues and with assault rifles standing in front of a building that I used to go into for work on a regular basis, it's tough. It's tough to look at. It's tough to understand. Even if, my respect, I understand why they need to be there. Don't get me wrong, but it's just the optics of it. Seeing a tank rolling down your street, seeing young people post bruises from the rubber bullets that hit them, or people who are washing their eyes out from tear gas. All of that stuff is difficult. And as a city, you know, we can't say the word trauma enough. It's certainly traumatizing, just to bear witness to. So I appreciate you highlighting that, and you highlighting that this is just the first conversation of many other conversations that we need to have that are both large and small. So I thank you, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.
I believe we have an attorney, Taylor Pacheco, from the Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, who's up next. And also I want to highlight that we've heard your comments. Thank you, Councilman Jones, for leading on this comment, that Mr. Brown's other 7 items need to be aired here today. We will make sure that if Mr. Brown is available to deliver those other 7 items, that we make time for that today. I did not mean, see, this is why community is great, because you guys let me know that I cut him off too soon. So we will remedy that, assuming that Mr. Brown is willing to do so. But after we hear from Taylor Pacheco. Awesome.
Taylor's good. Thanks, Hans. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. You can hear me okay? Great. So I'm an attorney with Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity. We do criminal record clearing work. So from that work, I can tell you that I see a lot of dockets, and I see a lot of things like guys who get picked up every day for weeks. Like they've just got lists and lists of charges, and you can see, you know, got picked up for loitering, got picked up for, you know, public trespass, things like drugs that never materialized, and the case got dismissed and withdrawn. And honestly, what other word for that is there besides harassment? You know, you have people who clearly are just walking around their neighborhoods trying to live, and every day they have police contact. I know people who don't carry a wallet because they're afraid it looks too much like a gun, and they know that they're going to get picked up by the cops at some point during the week. So when you see people angry, like, it makes sense. It makes sense, right? They live with that every day. We're looking at this now, but there are people who this is a part of their every morning reality. This is a part of their getting ready for the day routine, making sure they don't look like they're carrying a weapon for the inevitable moment when they get picked up by the cops later that day. It's not acceptable, right? We can't expect people to live like that quietly. So for a lot of us, none of this is surprising, none of it is shocking. And it feels very much like a curtain is being pulled back, but the machinery has always been there, right? Like the workings of what is going on has always been happening. That's what the frustration is. That's what's boiling up and boiling over. So we see the streets right now reflecting that anger, and it makes sense. And then, you know, to go beyond that, we see lots of people who were arrested over the past few days for the protests. And, you know, there was a lot of unrest in the streets. Some people were looting, some people were rioting and things of that nature. I think it all comes from the same place of anger, though. I think we have to remember that, you know, we can say that there are looters, we can say there are people doing bad things, but where did this start, right? We can't assign blame because we have to look at where this anger all started. In particular, you know, in my work, I look at the people being arrested too, and I'm thinking, how is this going to affect them in 6 months when we're not all as angry, when we're not all thinking about Black Lives Matter anymore, when we're not looking at this every morning when we turn on the news? These people now have criminal records that are going to affect their ability to get jobs, to apply for houses, to apply for student loans. These sentences, the police contact that we give people lasts forever. And I don't think a lot of people think about that. It doesn't go away. You get a sentence, you get out, you come home, but you're still living with that sentence. And even worse, your kids are still living with that sentence, right? Because you can't get a job to feed them. It's a cycle, it keeps feeding, and this is what the anger is. This is where the intervention with police can come in, because just an arrest, just a citation, just a ticket, just a contact can irrevocably change somebody's life. So we have to start changing policing to look more like actual community policing, right? Like if we want to look towards a future where there is a reconcilable future, we have to look at police not doing harm with what they're doing in the communities that we live in. I don't know what that's going to look like. I know there's a lot of anger, and I think we're going to have to figure out how to simmer that down before we move towards peace. But I want to say that the anger is very much justified. It is very justified.
Yeah, you know, thank you so much, Taylor. As I said when we started here, you know, this is real, right? And one of the things I said is that the pain is real, the racism is real, the violence is real. And I don't want anyone to feel as if there's any suggestion that it's not. So I appreciate you bringing us home to that, to say that people have real reason to be upset. This is not an overreaction. It's something that's very, very real. And so, you know, one of the things that I asked on top of this was for folks to unpack, you know, what anti-racist policies and practices they envision. And so, you know, maybe it's important to drill down a little bit on that just quickly, is the idea that, you know, in order to truly undo racism, we have to be anti-racist. We have to work every day with a racial equity lens to approach how we do our work, as whether you're in the policing or not, to undo what we can accept or should accept involves issues that are embedded in historical racism. And so some of the things you referenced in terms of folks who are afraid to carry wallets because they might be mistaken for weapons, who know that they're going to be stopped because of the community that they live in, and how do we reconcile that? How do we deal with that? How do we unpack it? And I think it starts by really speaking truthfully about it, but also I think that there's more that can be done, right? We can measure this in a way that it probably has not been measured before. We can measure police interactions in ways that hasn't been measured before, and we can really try and understand how we can infuse justice into a lot of the work that we're doing in policing and understanding who's doing what. And I'm confident that the models that exist around the country that do try and measure things like racism, you know, you can do that. You can't measure it directly, but you can develop a definition of and measure for those things that measure procedural justice, which often is akin to it, and really help us understand why people are being stopped inappropriately and who is doing the stopping and what remedial action is being taken to make sure that the stopping isn't happening. I'm not here to suggest that all stops are bad or that stops can never really fully go away, but I think that we can talk about that and its net impact on folks in a much different way. And I look forward to doing that. But again, enough from me. We do want to get to a few more folks. I want to be mindful of time. We're short on it. We initially put in place an area for city council folks to make some comments and to highlight what they want to do or where they see their role. I think organically our city council members so far, many of them have wanted to join the conversation, and I appreciate that. I encourage you folks, any other council folks, to let us know if you have more you want to say. But we'll probably just continue that path. Let you folks let us know where you are and what you want to do, as opposed to breaking from this public comment area to do that, if that's okay. So without further ado, Curtis has both the largest mic and has stolen the mic, and he's going to share his other 7 items if he can quickly.
Thank you again, Hans. I'm glad that everybody was willing to listen. It's beautiful. Making strides here. All right. So the other 7 on the list goes as follow. Eliminate paid administrative leave after discharging a firearm or use of force complaint. If found in good standing, they could receive the retro pay after the fact. Guns should be worn on the non-dominant side of their whole belt to clearly show intent and not reaction when drawing their weapons. Mental health education and a more in-depth de-escalation technique program. Any use of unauthorized restraint, hold, or tactics is automatic, short, unpaid suspension and disciplinary infraction. When an assailant is subdued and restrained and no longer poses a threat and is handcuffed, that individual should be placed upright within 1 minute of the threat being mitigated. And strict oversight and discipline of the retaliatory actions by fellow officers who are whistleblowers. And the final one, de-escalation techniques and CPI restraint training and transport. That's something that is taught to teachers currently, and it seems to work well in our public school systems. I believe it's something that needs to be reinforced with some of our law enforcement in ways to be able to restrain individuals without actually causing bodily harm. And that's basically our Philadelphia community policing reform policy. And once again, that was accumulated from a couple think tanks that I'm a part of and the community at large.
Thank you for both bailing me out for my earlier and thank you for also for your hard work and bringing that and putting it together. I think it's really helpful and powerful. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
I think, Danny, am I right? Is there a community member? Okay, I'm sorry. We have a question that came in, but that they want me to ask. So the question is why we don't hear more, or what is the stance on I should say, Black officers of color. So I guess Black officers and officers of color. So why don't we hear more from them, and what is the stance from Black officers and officers of color? And so I encourage folks to respond if they'd like to, but I think that I'm not a police officer, as everyone knows, I never have been. But as I mentioned before, and Danny, let me know if someone raises their hand and wants to respond. the officers I've spoken to of color recognize exactly what Councilman Jones has recognized, that it's incredibly complicated, and that some have referenced that they take off their uniform and they are just they're just another person of color, and they recognize how difficult it is for them in many ways. Others feel, you know, and I don't want to speak for any officers, but I'm trying to summarize what I've heard, that the commentary is unfair about them, that they work hard every day, and that the narrative that they feel exists on policing is not totally fair, and that they are good police officers and should be taken as such. Obviously, we've already unpacked the idea that policing is a profession and a system, and that the uniform in and of itself brings up emotions for many people. So I don't pretend to know the stance of all officers, but I do know that the folks I've spoken to highlight that it can be a very difficult day to be a police officer of color. It can be a very difficult time, and it can be really hard to do the job, given the high-profile events that come on, and also the day-to-day challenges that just come with being a police officer. So, you know, this conversation happens often about the idea that police officers of color need to do more, and I never know the answer. Is it fair to lay even more at the feet of police officers of color or not? I'm of two minds about it, but I do understand the question that perhaps what we need to do is, while we ask for more officers of color, also equip them with some of the stuff that we're talking about today. A culture that makes it okay for them to speak up, a culture that makes it okay for them to say that they don't want things to continue in a certain way, and the safety to have that autonomy and that open mind and the open mouth that is necessary. Because many other officers have just shared that it's just very difficult to speak up given the lack of that culture in some areas. So maybe that's the answer. I don't know if anyone else has anything else. Okay, so what I'd like to do is move on to Bilal Qayyum. Bilal Qayyum is the president of the Father's Day Rally Committee and also a PAC commissioner. And Bilal wants to share his feedback. We have to unmute Bilal.
Yep.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank Hans for organizing this session this afternoon. For y'all who don't know, I will say that we are very grateful and happy to have Hans as our executive director. So we're fortunate of the city of Philadelphia to have his leadership. Second thing I would like to say is to thank Brother Curtis Brown for his remarks and the 10 points that he made. I think they're excellent. And I know that the council folks probably wrote them down or they will get them. And Hans had asked me to make a comment about my feelings about what happened with Brother Floyd. And I reflected on it in a way that since I grew up in the 60s and I got really involved in the 60s on up to now, I thought about at each part of our history, there's tipping points. And I think what we've seen in the last week and a half is a tipping point within this country as relates to race relationships and beyond. In the 60s, there was a tipping point in the civil rights movement when the children, when the civil rights movement was almost in a stagnated state. But when the children got to marching in the South and hoses were put on them, that blew that movement wide open. And I think what's going on now, we're seeing many other young males and young women being killed in the last 10 years by the police. But I think Floyd's killing, because it was on social media and everybody's seen it, so, you know, it was like we were there. I think that's a tipping point within this movement now. And what I do like about, and I'm saying this word, like about what's going on now, is the number of white youth that are out there involved in marching peaceful and making demands. I want to say to all my brothers and sisters listening, I believe very strongly we cannot destroy white institutional racism. White folks have to destroy white institutional racism. They created it, they maintain it. It's their responsibility to destroy it. Do we have to challenge every time the ugly head raises? Yes. But we have to not carry that burden when we're talking about trauma and stuff. And I know therapists and folks are on, we can't no longer carry that burden. When I'm saying we as Black folks, if we're going to destroy white institutional racism, it has to be white folks. So I am really encouraged by the number of white folks and number of white leaders that are speaking up against that. I was on a conference call earlier today with the governor, and he spoke very strongly how he's committed to being more of a voice in this state, challenging among white folks, not among us, but among white folks, that they got to change their attitude and begin to accept us as full citizens of this society. The last thing I like to say is, people know me, I'm always looking for action. One of the biggest problems we have, and I know the commissioner is probably well aware of this, is there's an act called Act 111, which is basically the Arbitration Act. So the commissioner can fire any police officer, justifiable. They could challenge it. It's arbitration process they could go through. And a lot of them, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Hans, most of them do get their jobs back with back pay. So I'm asking everybody on this phone call to make a call to the state rep and state senator and even the governor's office and ask them to push for amendment of Act 111 to give us more of that power over the arbitration process. Second thing I'd like to just say is that we appreciate as a commission for all the recommendations and suggestions that are made. We need more power as a commission. Clearly, the council folks talked about it. The commission needs more money. And one of the things that me and Hans has talked about, and it's part of a recommendation, is in the city of Chicago, the Police Advisory Commission or the Oversight Commission gets 1% of the police department's budget as their budget. If we had something like that in Philly, it'd be great. We could hire more investigators. We could be more proactive. So council folks are still on the line. I want y'all to consider that and push that more money be added in our budget. I know that Councilman Kenyatta Johnson talked about earlier. He talked about getting additional resources from the state. That would be great. The last thing I wanted to say too, I'm sorry, but this is my last point. And if the police commissioner Outlaw is still on the line, I just want to say to you, I dealt with a lot of commissioners over the years and a lot of the top leadership in the police department. I know most of them and almost all of them have the best intentions and the best heart to really deal and develop a good relationship between the police and the community. But I could tell you, and it's still going on now, and it's going to be your challenge, Commissioner Outlaw, is the police officers on the street. They have to be dealt with because they're the ones that our young Black males and our young Black Latino males and other folks are dealing with every day. I'm seeing on videos constantly incidents like one in Germantown the other day where a young man was being, I don't know what he did, but he was on the ground. A police officer was on top of him. I couldn't tell if his knee was on him or not. The young man said, "I can't breathe." The response from the police officer was, "We don't take that stuff in the city of Philadelphia." That was not the right response. And he actually didn't say that. He actually said some other words. But that police officer, my understanding from a video I saw today, is still out working in the 14th Police District. He should have been, some action should have been taken against him. The police officer out there in the demonstration that pulled down the young lady's mask and shot in the face with pepper spray, actions had to take place. Those are the things that people are seeing, Commissioner, every day that I know that you're probably well aware of, but action has to be taken. And then letting the community know that actions have been taken. We are behind you, supporting you. Most of us have been around for many years. understand this police department. So we want to show you and give you our support. With that, I'd just like to once again commend and thank everybody for joining us today. It's been a great discussion, but discussion's great. It's action that counts. We got to move forward and take action to resolve some of these problems we're dealing with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bilal. As always, your leadership and highlighting some tangible things that you want to see get done in the immediate term. And I think that's fair for you to make a lot of people on this call. So thank you very much for your leadership, really. I want to make sure that we use the final few minutes to make sure that anyone who hasn't spoken, any policymakers who are present who want to comment, have that opportunity. Is there anyone else? I can't, okay, great. So what I want to do is thank everybody for coming here today. We spent an hour and a half together. There's an incredible amount of people on this call. A lot of expertise was here. Some of our city leadership, Commissioner Outlaw and some of her staff spent over an hour and a half here to hear what we have happening here in the city of Philadelphia, what our concerns are, and I appreciate that. Our city council folks spent time during this budget season to hear directly from us, and I appreciate that. And our members of the Police Advisory Commission who are already volunteers, who already taken an inordinate amount of time from their days to support me and to support the staff, are now here again. So I appreciate all of you so much. And I really
we do have some hands. Sorry.
Okay. Well, that's fine. I'm happy to have some hands. Let's go ahead.
I do see Gerald. You're holding up a sign. Did you have something you wanted to say?
A sign.
Gerald, do you have your audio on?
Okay, why don't we go to the next person?
Okay, there you go. Here we go. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, I want to preface this by, before I'm not going to stay long, I know we're short of time, but with the Guardian, when Commissioner Ramsey was here, it says here, the Department of Justice reported that Philadelphia police brutality found that the majority of officers suffered no consequences for their excessive use of force. 73% of police officers found to have violated department policy in shooting incidents and did not receive termination or even suspension. I have a problem with that. So I would like to say to City Council, I heard much about the arbitration. We need to stop that. If we always saying the unions and laws prevent the people, if we never did anything, we'd be back in slavery by now. So we got to break that cycle with the arbitration. Always can't do nothing because of arbitration. I'm living with this. I'm done with this. Philadelphia City Council should not approve any contact with the police union that will protect police officers with serious violations. Number two, police with serious violations cannot get their jobs back through arbitration, nor be assigned desk duty, especially if the officer has been fired. Number three, we need a public channel that lists criminal profiles. As we already have, we have the channel that shows all the criminals in our community. But we need also a channel that shows the police officers that live in our community and service our community, so we know who they are. Otherwise, they'll come into our community and just do whatever they want, and then the rogue ones is just what we have it in our system. We had the same situation we have in Minneapolis. Also, I say we need a police report card, a website that allows people to log on, their interaction with police officers, good or bad, and rate them. And also, we need an open website to allow others to see this information, log on the badge number, date, or incident report if necessary. And then also, I just believe when we have teenagers. I have a son who works 2 jobs. This is my husband of 40 years. I just want things to change. I'm sick of the talk. I want action. I don't want to be crying. I want to be at another funeral. I want action. I want the legislators to do something, and I want to be a part of that. And I'm gonna be down at City Council speaking against the raises for the police officers, because I don't think they earn it. They are good officers, but the good officers need to speak up when they see their a rogue officer do things that are illegal to the citizens. That's my take.
We have
okay.
hand if you want it.
I think Commissioner will be leaving us now. I'm not sure if she's still here, but if
she is,
we're going to be ending soon. I want Commissioner a moment to just say goodbye and wrap up the final thoughts. So can we unmute the Commissioner before she has to go?
Yep, she's unmuted.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for their time. I hear the passion and the energy behind this, and I agree. It's time to operationalize all of these theories and principles that so many people sit around a table and discuss. So I appreciate everyone's comments, their recommendations. We took notes. I do have staff on the call as well. And I certainly hope that this isn't the last time that we meet in this way. So I appreciate everybody's heartfelt time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate you. On that note, I want to be mindful of time. So Danny, if you can remind everybody quickly when our next public meeting is. Do you know that offhand?
Yep, it's June 15th is our next planned public meeting.
Okay, and that'll probably be another virtual meeting. So look for it on Twitter or on our listserv. I apologize to those folks who were waiting to be heard from. I do want to make sure that we end on time for the folks that are here on the call. But I appreciate you all. This is a call that included 92 people who took an hour and a half out of their time to be with us. We appreciate you and thank you very much for your contributions today. Please continue to engage us, follow us on Twitter, PHLPAC, and check us out on the website, phila.gov/PAC.